I want to take a look at how I might model this part. I imagine there's as many different ways as there are people, but if I look at this, notice how this face blends into the side right here. So this comes up and it blends into the cylinder here. There's no radius dimension given for this arc, but if we look on this 3D model, we see it appears that it becomes tangent to the face of this cylinder. And then if we had an imaginary line across here, if we had a line that was tangent to, we wouldn't need a radius dimension on the arc. It would all fall into place. I have to decide whether to start from the top view or the front view. And either way, I guess, would work. But I have this 610 dimension here, plus a 95 here, and of course the corresponding 95 over here. If I imagined, and I'm going to go to this center line, this 500. If I imagined this area right in here as a rectangle with the corners of it filleted, that might make a good place to start. So I'll go to SolidWorks, and I've already created a model, and I'll show you how I've done that. And so if I go to the top view, notice how this face blends in to this vertical cylinder. It blends into this horizontal cylinder, or the tapered line on that cylinder. So let's take a look at how we might model this part. So I'll go to the front view, and I'm going to start a new sketch, and I'm going to put a rectangle, and I'm going to just start with that rectangle out here in space. Now I like to use symmetry about the origin as much as possible, so I'm going to put a constraint between the midpoint of this line and the origin, so that anything I do on one side will also be done on the other side. I'm going to dimension the height of this as 500. And then for the width of it, I'm going to hold off just a minute on dimensioning that. Okay, let me change this line to a construction line, and I'm going to draw a rectangle. And as I go through here, you'll see me draw lots of rectangles. So I started out with a rectangle. I'm going to do another rectangle about like this, and I'll do the same thing on this side. Now we could mirror that. One of the things I'm doing is I want to put a collinear relation on there for me, if it will. And then I'm going to dimension the diametral dimension from here to here. I want that diameter to be 114. And I'm having to double click on my dimensions in order to change them. If anybody knows what I changed, I went into the options and I didn't see what I did. And that just drives me bananas that I have to keep doing that. I see that it didn't automatically put the collinear on there, but I'll go ahead and I'll make these two lines equal, and then I'll make this line and this line as equal. Okay, and then I know that I have a dimension from here over to here of 610. And then I have to double click on that. I'm not used to doing that. I don't know what I changed. And then the dimension of this is 95. Okay, so it all turns black. It's so far everything is constrained. I recommend that every time you do something right, you save it. So there's no real excuse for losing any work, or no more work than you're willing to do over again. Save often every time you do something right. Alright, I'm going to put a fillet in these corners, and I'm going to do that fillet 235. And I'll put it in this corner. Now it's going to tell me it doesn't, I have that midpoint. I'll tell it go ahead and put that in there, and do it over here as well. I'm then going to put a center line from the origin coming up to the midpoint of this line, and I'm going to turn on dynamic mirror entities and select this center line, and I'm going to draw a line from about right here, and I'm going to come down to about right here, And I'm going to move my mouse away, and then I'll move back. It changes to an arc. And then I'll come over to about there, and I'm going to come over to the end point there. It's going to tell me that because it doesn't need that symmetry going across there. I'll turn off that symmetry. And then we'll dimension the distance from here to here as 25. And I'll dimension this radius as 205. Alright, then I'll dimension the height from here to here as 44. Now I was expecting it to all turn black, but we can see why it missing a tangent here, so I'll select those, I'll add the tangent on that side, and now it all turns black. It's fully defined. I did something right. I will save it. Alright, then I'm going to draw a rectangle. Again, I use lots of rectangles. I'm going to draw a rectangle up to about here, and then I'm going to draw another rectangle over to about there. And I actually accidentally snapped there right at the end, so let me draw it again. Let's go ahead and dimension this one, then I'll put the next one in. So I'm going to dimension the diametral dimension from here to here, and I'm going to do that as 190. And then I'm going to dimension, or let's put in another rectangle. So let's put in a rectangle from here, and I'm going to come over here about like that, and I'll dimension that from here to here. Again, I want the diametral dimension, so I click on this side of the center line, and I'll change that to 198. As you're doing, or as I'm doing this, refer back to the original drawing, and so here's the 198 and the 190. I need to put this 305 from here down to here, and the 35 from here to here. And so we'll do that. Wrong one. So I'll dimension this 35. And then the dimension from here up to this line, and that dimension is 305. Okay, so that all turns dark. It's all fully constrained. Now it might be a good idea to put this geometry in several different sketches, but I'm going to put a lot more geometry than I normally do. I'm going to put into a single sketch, but you know, maybe it would be best to do this as multiple sketches. And I'm going to go ahead and draw a circle then from here up to here. And let's see, that might be everything that I want to do though in this sketch. To make this look like it did in the drawing, so if you're following along, I have this dimension over here, so I'm going to delete that dimension. I'm going to put it over here so that it just looks more like the drawing, in case anybody would get confused by that. Alright, I think I've got everything that I want to do in this sketch. So this is going to be the cylindrical feature in the center. There's a cylindrical boss coming out towards us and going the other direction. I'm going to revolve this about this line and revolve this about this line to give us the cylindrical features up here and up here. Alright, I'll finish sketch, and I did something right, so I'll save it. And then I'm going to do a new sketch on the top plane. And I'm going to draw a circle at the origin. I like to use the origin for symmetry. And let's go ahead and dimension that. So I'll dimension this, and I want to dimension this as a radius dimension, so I'll change that to a radius dimension, and let's put in that radius 178. And again, I say I draw lots of rectangles. I'm going to draw a center point rectangle, and I'm going to do that from here over about like that. Now I want actually the midpoint of this to be at that point, so I'm going to select that midpoint, and I need to rotate around a little bit so I can get this, and I'll get this point, and I missed that, but I can do midpoint here. I was intended to get the midpoint there, but I got the line, so I'll do a midpoint constraint there. That constrains it that way. And then I'm going to, let's drag this down a little bit. I'm going to dimension this dimension as 44. Now it might be a good idea, or 114 I mean, it might be a good idea to actually tie that. There was the diameter 114 on this, so go back and find the variable name for that dimension and then put it into here, so that if you make a change up here, this also changes. I'm going to get lazy though and not do that. I'm going to change this line to a construction line, and I will change this line also to a construction line. Now I really should change this line to a construction and this line to a construction. We'll see why, but I'm going to hold off on doing that to demonstrate something here in a few minutes. And so then I want a line tangent to this over to here and so forth. So I'm going to draw a line. When you go to draw this line, don't click on the quadrant, but click someplace on the circle and hold the mouse button down. Don't let go of the mouse button. And see, it's going to automatically put that tangent on there. And so I'll come over to here, and I'll do the same thing. And actually this time I didn't hit it in the right place, but hopefully it'll put it on there for me. And I'll do another line, and I'll do that up here. Now we might do some mirroring of geometry rather than do it this way, but we see that it did get the tangent on there for me, so I don't need to go back and add that in. I'm going to trim up part of this arc, and so I'm going to do trim, and I'll trim off this piece and this piece, and let's just go ahead and delete this arc. I'll delete that arc, and actually I lost my dimension on that, so let's put that back in. And when I did that, for some reason I lost the concentric on here, or the equal dimension, so let's just add that back on there. On my trial, and now it's what's going on here? On my trial, this, oh, I lost my tangents. Okay, so on my trial test run of this, that didn't happen. It was all went really easily. I don't know what I did. Sometimes when you're going live, you go too fast and you end up making extra work for yourself. I had to put those tangents back in. There's several different ways that I could have done that, but anyways, it's done. Alright, let's draw another circle here, and I'm going to draw a circle at this quadrant, and we'll go ahead then and put some dimensions on here. So let's dimension this diameter as 280, and I'm going to dimension this diameter as 20. Now I don't need these two circles for a while, so maybe I should have put them in a different sketch, but I'm going to change those two circles to construction as well. Okay. And then later on I'm going to put a plane in here at a 30-degree angle. So let's go ahead and put in some construction geometry for creating that plane as well. Now be careful you don't get this line perpendicular to that line. I don't really know where it's at. I know that it's at 30 degrees, so I don't know that 30 degrees is perpendicular, my guess, and it wasn't. So watch out for those automatic relations. You know, you want to get the relations that you intend. Okay, so I am finished with that sketch, and so that's from the top view. I'll save this, and then I'm going to go back to the front view, and later on we'll put a hole in here, a counterbore hole. And because the counterbore hole goes from the bottom up, I have to do a little bit of calculations, and I try to avoid doing any calculations if I can. So I think I'll do the sketch myself rather than use the hole command. There may be reasons though where you want to use the hole command for putting fasteners in your part. But I'm going to start a new sketch on the front plane, and I'm going to draw a rectangle. We're going to have a hole that goes up here as well. So I'm going to draw a rectangle. So I use lots and lots of rectangles, and I'm going to draw that rectangle from here. And when I go over here, I want to be careful that I don't pick this point right here, the midpoint of that line, because I don't know that that's where it's at. And so I'm going to click about right there. I'll change this line to a construction line, and we'll put it in again, and we'll this time select down here and put in the 50. There we go. That more looks proportional to my drawing. Alright, and so I also want to put a hole down here, and so I'm going to draw a line. I'll do it from here down to here, over to here. Now be careful it doesn't snap to any points there. It looks like it's okay. Actually, let's just make this smaller to begin with, and I'll come over, and I'll come up, and I'll come over to here and back to there. Okay, now I'm going to change this to a construction center line so that I can put the diametral dimension in here. And I will then dimension from here over to here, and I'll be careful this time, get it over here on this side, not on this side. That does radius. Get over here for the diameter, and that diameter is 140. And then the diametral dimension from here to here, get over here on this side, and that dimension 108. Then the distance from here down to here is 38. It all turns dark. It's all fully constrained. Now one thing that I'm going to do here is this is seen as an open profile, and so it'll give me a problem, an error later on, and it'll say, do you want to close this? And I'll say yes, I want to close that. So let's just go ahead and close that right now, and I'll close this one, close that right now, so I have closed profiles in here. Okay, so that finishes that sketch, to cut the holes up here and to cut the hole down here. And then I've got a hole that goes in the bottom here, and so let's do a new sketch, and I'm using only the origin planes as much as possible to do any sketching, and I try to avoid doing any extraneous dependencies from one sketch to another. And so I'm going to do convert, although in this case, well, I have the diameter for this in sketch number 1, so I'll just convert that circle, and so I don't even need a diameter here. I can change that in sketch number 1. Alright, I think I'm ready to start creating some solid geometry. Although I want to do one more thing. We have a rib that goes in here. So I want to do the sketch for the rib. And I'm trying to decide. I wish I had actually put it in earlier, but I didn't. So I will go ahead and do it now. So I'm going to start a new sketch on the front plane. And I'm going to draw a line, and I'm going to come over to here. I'll move my mouse away and then come back. It changes to an arc, and I'm going to come over about like that, and then I'll go up to this point right here. And I'm trying to decide whether I want to go to here. Yeah, that's the center of my cylinder. Alright, now if I put tangents on here, so if I do that as tangent, and I do this as vertical, it turns black. It's already fully defined. I don't need to put any dimensions on that. Now I actually wish I had put that sketch up here before I cut the hole, so I'll just drag that up here. And you should probably rename all of your sketches too, so that a year from now when you go to edit something, things make logical sense. I'll save the file. Now I'm going to drag the roll-up bar so only sketch number 1 is visible. And then I'm going to do something that might not be expected. I'm going to go to the Surfaces tab, and I'm going to do an extruded surface, and I'm going to select this curve, and I'm going to go mid-plane, and I need to go far enough that it will go all the way through the part. Now you might use some parameters so that if you change the part, you know, to make sure that it's going to go all the way through the part, even if you make changes. But I'll just put in a number that I am sure will go all the way through the part. And I'm going to drag this over a little bit, and I'm going to click on this so that I can see features of my browser that I want to turn this back on, so I can just click here to toggle that on and off to turn that back on. And I'm going to do extrude again, so I'll do an extruded surface, and I'm going to select this time that one, and I'll put it mid-plane, and I'll say OK to that. I'm going to show my next sketch, and I'm going to then do a trim surface. And for my trimming tool, I'm going to select this sketch right here, and then I'm going to tell it I want to keep, and actually it might be easier, I want to get that down here. Well, I'll just rotate it around. I want to keep this area inside there. I was about to put it on remove, and then I could just pick the 2 areas I want to remove. Now notice that it's previewing. I want to keep that. It's previewing that is what I want, but I say OK to it, and it trims away that top portion up here, which I didn't want. So it previewed right, it did it wrong. So I'm going to undo that, and I'll go back, and earlier I said that I should change this line to construction. So I'll change that to construction, and I'll change this line to construction. Okay, now when I do that trim surface again, or trim with surface, so I'm going to do trim surface. I'm going to select, this is my trimming tool, and I want to keep this area within here, and it previews correctly, and when I say OK, this time it in fact kept all of that coming up here, so it did what I intended that time. Thicken. I will select this surface, and I'll put in the 44, so there it is. I'll say OK to that. And so we see now that this thickness goes beyond the second extruded surface. And so I'm going to do cut with surface, and it asked me to select the surfaces for the cut. I'm going to select that, and then I need to flip that arrow so that it's going to cut towards the inside. And then I can hide the surface body. So that little trick right there, let me turn off sketch 1 for a minute. That little trick made this geometry really easy to create, where I imagine if you attempted this before watching the video, you probably spent quite a bit of time trying to figure out how to get that to work. Alright, I'm going to turn on the sketch again, and I'm going to select this line, and I'm going to go back to my features, and I'll do a revolve, and I want to select this area and this area. I'll say OK to revolve that, and I'm going to come down here, I'll select this line, and I'm going to do revolve again, and I will select the contours, this area, and this area right in here, and I will say OK to that. And then I'm going to select this circle, and I'm going to do extrude, and I will set that to go mid-plane, and I forget what the distance was on that, so let's go back and check. So that was 254. So I'll put in the 254. And so we have that rectangle, and I have a big thunderstorm coming out outside. I might have to turn my computer off for safety reasons, or I guess I can just unplug it because I'm on a laptop with a battery. Alright, let's see where we're at. Let's hide that sketch number 1. I did a few things right. I can't remember when I last saved it. And I will drag the roll-up bar down to see sketch number 2. I see that's the rib. And so I'm going to put a rib in here. I will select this curve. And one of the important things was this line going across here, and this line going across here when you're doing a rib to a cylinder. And that thickness I think was 25. And then I'm going to mirror that rib to the other side. Now I tried to do the sketch and do them both. It was one rib, but that didn't work out for me. Maybe you can get it to work. I'll do mirror. For my mirror plane, I will select the right side plane, and then for the features I'll select that rib and mirror that to the other side. Did something right, save it. I will drag the roll-up bar down to the next sketch, and I'm going to select this line, and then I'm going to do a revolve cut, and I've got to unselect this area, and so let me just select just that area, and I'll say OK to that. And I need to make that sketch visible again, so I'll expand that feature, toggle the sketch back on again. I'll select this line, I'll do a revolve cut, and make sure that I have this. See this arrow up here? If I just say OK now, it's going to give me an error. I need to make sure that I select the contour. Now that arrow is down here, it goes away, and I'll say OK to that, and I cut that hole through. I will hide that sketch. I go down to the next sketch, and I have this circle here, so let me select that circle. I will do an extrude cut with the circle, and I'm going to flip the direction, and I could tell it to just go through all, but be careful when you do something like that, because you might change this in such a way that it will actually intersect this cylinder. And so instead of through all, I'll tell it to go up to next, and I'll say OK to that, and there we see now we have that hole. Now I want to put a rib in here, and so I'm going to go back and I'll turn sketch number 2, or actually whatever the second sketch. I renamed these. I need to find that. Alright, so I'll turn this sketch on, and I'm going to then do a plane. I'll select that line, and it's already previewing it, but I don't trust it, so I'm going to select the top plane, make sure that I have it in there correctly, and now I'll hide that previous sketch. I will do a new sketch on that plane. I'll do convert entities. I don't know what I did. Select the line, select the arc, and I'll say OK. OK, I got it that time. Alright, now I'm going to draw a line from this point, actually I'm not sure that it's on that point right there. And so let's you know what, I'm going to take this line out here. We'll put that back in here if we need it. Let's draw a line from this line, and again, be careful you don't get the midpoint of this line, don't get the end point. I'll get that line here someplace about like that, and I'm going to connect the other end of it here in a minute. I'll put the dimension, the angle dimension between here and here as 55. Okay, and then I will select the arc up here, and I'll hold down the control key. I'll select this point, and I want to make this coincident, and let me try that again. I got the face instead of the edge. I want to get this. Oh, there we are. I'm getting that face again. I want to get this edge, not the face. Get that edge. Hold down the control key. I'll select it. That time I got the line. The joys of live presenting. And then that time I didn't hold the control key. Alright, so now I have them both. I have the edge and I have the point. I'll do, I'm going to do pierce on that. Okay, there. That time I think we got it. I'm going to change this line to construction. And I'll go and do my rib. And I think this one was 20. I can't remember. I guess we better go check and see what that was. The rib was 20. And I need to flip that direction. I'll say OK to that, and so there's my rib. I'll hide that work plane again. I can just toggle it right here to hide that, and I'm almost done. Now I just need to do a circular pattern of some geometry, and so I will do a circular pattern. I'm going to select this hole as a feature I want to pattern, and then for the rotation I could pick a circle, but we could make a change that would cause that to fail. I could probably the safest would either be this cylinder or this cylinder out here. I'll select the face of this cylinder, and I've got 6 copies. I'll say OK to that, equally spaced in 360 degrees, and then we'll do the rib. So I'll do another circular pattern, and I'm going to select this rib, and I will then select the cylinder again, and now I don't want the instance here and the instance here. It seems like it should just combine those, you know, and not give us any trouble, but it gives us an error, so we'll tell it to skip this one and skip this one, and we'll say OK to that. So there was our part. Hopefully you're able to follow along with that, and hopefully you gave it a shot before you watched my solution. If you come up with a solution which uses fewer features, then you know, I would be interested in seeing that solution. Now I could have actually simplified this in some, well, I don't know, it's simple, but I could have put more stuff into the first sketch, like for the hole, for this hole into the first sketch. But yeah, that's it.